Alright, hello everyone. So we're just gonna jump off from where the last video ended, and straight off you can see I've picked my Narn fleet. My opponent is now ready, so I am going to ready up, and what they should do is take us straight through to the deployment screen. So this is the first time where we're actually looking at the map in which the game will be played on. You can see it's made up of hexagons, and you've got a green deployment zone and a red deployment zone, and these are the zones that I mentioned back in the first video. So for this, what we need to do is we're the green side. Your ships will always display as green, and there's the enemy side. You can see that they have picked exactly the same ships as us. How convenient. And so what we're going to do is now just sort of place our ships where we want them to go, and we can place them anywhere within this sort of green rectangle here, which is about 5 hexes across, and covers the whole of the map, which I think I said was 30 hexes tall. It's not hugely important. So what are you thinking about when you deploy your ships? Generally speaking, you want ships that are going to support each other, to be close to each other. So are you going to place all your ships in the same sort of cluster, or are you going to spread them out and possibly go for a pronged attack, knowing that those ships that you are placing more separately might be a bit more isolated? So a couple of tactical decisions to be made there. I think for the purposes of this, I will just place the ships together, keep it simple. So how do you place them? Well, you select the ship that you want to place, Jaquan 2 in this case, and then you, by left clicking on it, and then you left click where you would like that ship to go. And what you do is you see it places, and you've got some green icons here. So the arrow keys change the direction that it's facing. So that would be facing to the left, and you can go around all 6 sides of the hexagon, and now you're back facing towards the right. The enemy's on my right hand side, so I think I'll keep it facing that way. The other thing is you'll see a number. This is the speed that the ship is going. So it's going at 5, which is a moderate, quite sensible speed for a ship to be going at. What you can do though is change that with the plus or minus icons here. So you can move it down as far as 3, or you can put it up as high as 7. I'm going to leave it at 5, and you'll see with the other capital ship I also left that at 5. In terms of, you'll see when I hover over the ships you get some information on them. Some of this is the same information you'll have seen before, like the profiles, as defensive profiles, i.e. how easy it is to hit, how far away the ships are from each other. So at the minute I have selected Jaquan 1, you can see the white circle around it, and then by clicking on Jaquan 2 you can see it says that its distance is 2 hexes, so 1, 2. It's pretty straightforward. Speed, thrust, turn cost, there's just a bit of information there, and what you may have seen me do there was just actually right click on it, which opens up the ship control sheet here, which is absolutely identical to the ship control sheet that we saw in the fleet selection video. Okay, so all that remains to do now is just sort of place the rest of my ships. So what I will do is place my Thetis frigate here, so that's the lighter medium ship you might remember. I'm going to make it go a little bit faster at 6. It's a small agile ship, so it should be fine to do that. And then the fighters I'm going to have just sort of filling in the gaps between my fleet. No particular reason other than a bit of symmetry pleases me. It makes me feel like, possibly scares the opponent into thinking I've got a plan when in fact I don't have anything of the sort. Okay, and again the fighters even more manoeuvrable than the frigates, so I've got them going at 7, possibly to race off on the first turn, but then again possibly I might just slow them down and keep them escorting the ships. We'll have to see. Okay, and then once you've got your ships where you want them to be and you're quite happy with it, just click on the green tick here, and that will confirm your deployment. And I'm just going to briefly pause the video now while I go and deploy the other ships so we can move into the initial orders phase. And we're back. So what we can see is that my opponent has now deployed, and he's chosen an alternative strategy here. So he has separated his fleet into two groups, each one with a capital ship, a frigate, and two groups of fighters. Will that prove a tactical masterstroke against my more sort of clumpy positioning? Who knows? And it will take some time to find out. But for the purposes of this video, I really just want to deal with the first phase of the game, which is initial orders. And there's really three main phases once you've deployed and got started, and this is turn one. This is the actual start of the game. So your three main phases are initial orders, which we're doing just now. You'll then go into movement orders, and then you'll go into the firing phase, where the damage really happens. But for the initial order phase is much more tactical, because what you're going to do here, and we're going to cover, I think, just a sort of three main elements of things that happens in the initial order phase. One is your sensors. What are you going to do with them? Or EW, which stands for electric warfare. We have to allocate them, and you have two main choices. You can either allocate them offensively, which will help you shoot someone in the firing phase, or you can allocate them defensively, which will prevent someone from shooting you, or help to prevent them from shooting you in the firing phase as well. So there's a choice to be made here, and depending on who you're playing, you don't know what they're going to do. They on the other side are making their initial orders at the same time as you are, so it's a bit of a guessing game. What I'm going to do is just sort of do one of each on my main cruisers, so we can sort of get the sort of principles across. So for Jacon 1's feeling a bit aggressive and is going to go full offensive on the counterpart Jacon, the evil Jacon 2 in this case. However, my Jacon 2, and I realise now that my naming convention has not been particularly helpful, but my second cruiser, Jacon 2, is much more nervous and is far more worried about getting shot at. So what they're going to do is just do a token sensor lock on their counterpart down here. And the reason that they're spending one electronic warfare on offense and the rest on defense, rather than putting it all on defense, is that so long as you have 1 point allocated to another ship, then it will mean that you effectively have a soft lock, and that means that range penalties for shooting that ship during the firing phase, and this is something that we're going to get into in a later tutorial, will not be doubled. If you don't lock on anything at all, it effectively doubles the range penalty for all your weapons and makes it very, very hard to hit anything other than at close range. So by putting a singular lock on one of the ships, what you're catering for is the possibility that this ship, Jacon 1, is going to go full offensive in the same way. And as you hover over the ships, you can see that the sort of lines been drawn, and those lines are essentially your electronic warfare. So you can see solid green line from this ship means it's got a very strong offensive lock there. A thin green line from this ship means that it's got a sort of soft lock on that. And then if you look at the ship control sheet, you can see in DEW, defensive EW, 7 points. And again, if you hover over the icon, you can again see there's a DEW field there, and that is 7 points. So that is offensive and defensive EW at a very basic level. There is a third type of common EW, which you'll see there, which is CCEW, and again CCEW. At the minute that's set to 0. Now, what that effectively is sensor points that you are allocating to shooting down enemy fighters. It's close combat EW is what the CC stands for. The fighters are very far away. If you hover over them, you see the 39 hexes away. I don't need to worry about that in turn 1, so I'm not going to assign any of my EW to CC. But if I wanted to, for whatever reason, and later in the game you would definitely want to, you left click on the ship, and then there's this blue button here, add CCEW. So if we add a couple of points to that, you can see it's noted there, and that's how you would do that if you wanted. There's also a couple of other useful UI here, so you could remove all EW. So if you realise that you're not happy with how you've allocated your EW, well, you can click on that and that will remove it all for that particular ship. And then open ship details. that just duplicates the function of right clicking on a ship. So you can right click to bring up the ship control sheet, or you can left click and then click on the open ship details icon. Does exactly the same thing. Now, I did remove all the EWs from that, and I just realised I didn't actually tell you what I was clicking on to set it. So, left click on the ship that you want to set EW for, then left click on the ship that you want to target, and then you've got a plus or minus here. So I clicked the plus 4 times, so at the minute I've got 4 offensive EW on it. I don't want 4, so I'll use a minus, reduce that down to 1 EW. And again, if you're ever unsure who you've targeted, you can look on the ship control sheet and it'll give you the full information there. And again, graphically, you can click on this green icon here that's in the shape of a sensor to see where you're locked on. I haven't done anything for my fantasies yet. I will, I think, do exactly the same as I've done with cruisers. One will go full lock, one won't. Actually, that's a terrible idea, and the reason that's a terrible idea is because the Fantasies weapons are a bit shorter range. They've got medium lasers, and my heavy cruisers have heavy lasers. And if you look closely, hopefully you can pick this up in the video, you can see that there's range penalties there. And for the heavy lasers, that's 1.65 per hex, which is quite a long range weapon. It essentially means that you have, for every hex distance between you and the target, it is an extra 1.65% chance of not hitting it. So the longer the range, the more that adds up. 10 hexes would mean minus 16.5% chance of hitting it, and so on. For the medium lasers, it's 2.5% per hex. So the higher the per hex number, the greater the range penalty, and generally speaking, the longer range weapons will have a lower value per hex. Okay, I'll explain that in more detail in the weapons firing phase, but I just wanted to explain why I've decided to cancel my sensors from these ships, because I think even if I go full lock, I just won't have a chance of hitting them this turn. Okay, so that very sort of brief run through electronic warfare. It's one of the more complicated aspects of the game, but in being complicated, it's also one of the more fun, and having to sort of second guess what your opponent's going to do. And you can either leave your ships very vulnerable to taking fire, or you can predict what your opponent's going to do and then successfully pick off the ship that they have left undefended, and it's a very satisfying thing when it happens. Couple of other things just to briefly mention. One is power management. So in the initial orders phase, and only in the initial orders phase, you can actually turn off some of your lighter systems to gain a bit more power, and then reallocate that power to other systems. So I'm going to do one example of this where, if you look, when you hover over these weapons, you will see a section of the screen becomes highlighted blue, and that is your firing arc. That is the direction which these weapons can fire. What you'll notice about these 4 when I go over them is they are all firing backwards, and no one's behind me, so I don't really need them this turn, and I say this turn. So if I turn them all off, what happens in the reactor box is, for each weapon I turn off, I gain 2 extra power. So 4 times 2, I've got 8 extra power. And there's 2 things I can do with that. One, I can use it to boost my scanner, so I get more EW, or I could use it to boost my engines to get more thrust, which will help me in the movement phase. For this reason, I don't expect to be doing any complicated maneuvers. I just want to sort of close the distance, so I don't need extra thrust this round. But if I did, I would click on the engine, a plus symbol would come up, and I would add a couple of extra thrusts, and you can see that it highlights yellow to show that it's been boosted, and the amount of power per thrust changes between different ships. So for this one, if you just hover it, you can see the engine has an efficiency of 3. That means it takes 3 power for each point of additional thrust. I had 8 power, I added 2 thrust, that cost me 6 power, I've got 2 remaining. But like I say, I don't really need to do that this turn, so I'm not going to. What I would like to do is improve my sensors, but, and you can see I increased it by 1 point to 9, But unfortunately that cost 9 power and I only had 8. So you can now see the reactor's -1, and if I was to try and commit my orders, it's warning me I haven't done any sensors for the 2 frigates there, but that's okay, that's intended. It will then tell me the following ships have insufficient power, and that's because the reactor's at a negative value. So it's saying I need to turn off another system before I continue. I can either reduce my scanners, turn these weapons back on, or I can look at one of my light weapons going forward and think, yeah, I probably am not going to take that much fire this turn, or the fire I'm going to take, these weapons couldn't intercept anyway. So I'll turn another one of them off, get another 2 power, and then I've got 9 power to boost that, and I'm quite happy now. So that's power management of systems, and different ships have different systems that you can turn off. But generally speaking, you're always looking to either boost your engine or your scanners with that extra power. And then just the final thing I want to cover, with one eye on the length of the video, is ballistics. So certain weapons qualify as ballistics. These tend to be missiles, the torpedoes, or mines. And there's only one type of mine in the game at the minute, and it's the Narn energy mine, which the Duke-1 cruiser has 2 of. These weapons, unlike all other weapons, can only be fired in the initial orders phase. All ballistic weapons are like that. And the reason for that is essentially they are projectile weapons, so you are actually launching them in this phase and they will hit the target in the firing phase, is the idea. So if you don't launch them in the initial phase, you don't then get another chance to launch them in the firing phase, so it's really important that you don't forget to launch them. In terms of the energy mines, these are actually a proximity weapon, so they're actually quite unusual, but what you do is you left click on the energy mine and then you take a guess where you think the enemy's going to go. So this ship's moving at 6, if it moved forward 6 hexes it would go there. I'm just going to throw an energy mine down there, take a chance on it. They are, if you get a direct hit on a ship, they are quite damaging, but if you hit a fighter flight it will absolutely destroy them, and that's where a lot of the real value in energy mines is. But you need to guess right. Your opponent also knows that you have energy mines, so they're going to be trying to guess where your ships are going, or where you're putting your mines, sorry, and they're going to try and avoid them by moving erratically, possibly. It's another element of guesswork and tactics, and is one of the kind of more fun parts of the game. Okay, I think I'm pretty much happy with everything there. So, one thing, you'll see me move this map around. I'm just, if you hold left click or indeed right click and then move the map around, then sorry, with the mouse, that's all I'm doing there, and to zoom in and out is just the mouse scroll wheel for me, so very simple to use. Okay, I think I'll wrap this video up there. So the next one we're going to look at movement phase, and I'll see you then. Thanks.